The leech has 2 daughters, give and give. 3 things are never satisfied, and 4 never say enough. That's right, we're looking at Proverbs chapter 30, verses 15 through 17 this week. And today we're going to look at we're just jumping right in. We're going to get started at the beginning of it here. And I'm going to talk about the imagery of this leech thing that we're talking about in Agur here. And Agur is saying in chapter 30, what is he talking about? Now, some call this sentence a riddle of Agur because it's enigmatic. It is an enigma. It doesn't just tell you, hey, these things are horrible, this is bad, those who indulge in sin never get enough. It doesn't say that. But he uses different things to get us to drive us to think. And that's what a lot of these proverbs are, to make you think. It doesn't just flat out tell you. A lot of the proverbs do just flat out tell you, hey, don't do this, do this. But these are meant to make you really ponder and meditate on what's going on here. So now, as we look in this text here, we have the leech, or the horse leech, as the KJV renders the word. Usually refers to creatures that feed off the blood of another animal, right? There are leeches in the Middle East that will enter into the body of the host, into the mucous membranes, and attach themselves there. I read stories of horses with leeches in their throats, or dogs with leeches under their tongues. So they usually go in, they try drinking the water, and the leech would enter in, or they would get water up their nose, and the leeches would go in and attach themselves. And the animals, they wouldn't know, the people wouldn't know that they're there. And so the animals would grow anemic, they would begin to spit blood, and they were not treated. If the leeches were not removed, they would eventually die. Now, in my studies, I came upon another completely different meaning for this word. Now, in Hebrew, the word Alukah is from an obscure, unused word that means to suck, or bloodsucker, which is why most translations, even as old as the 1599 Geneva Bible, which is older than the King James Version, have the word leech. What sucks blood? Well, leeches, right? Some suggest that this is merely an inference, not a definition of the word, right? You're only inferring that this is what it means, leech, because it just means bloodsucker. Well, what is a bloodsucker? Well, what does that mean? Now, even the Geneva, in its notes, suggests something different could be spoken of here. It says, the leech hath 2 forks in her tongue, which here he calleth her 2 daughters, whereby she sucketh the blood, and is never satiated. All right, so, a leech has a tongue. Well, if you look at a leech, it doesn't have a tongue. What are you talking about? So what's going on here? Well, as I researched, I found that Alukah was a name given to a demonic vampire creature in Jewish mythology. In one of the concordances, I found a nod to this. It says, perhaps an Aramaic loanword, vampyre-like demon. That's found in the Brown-Driver-Brigs concordance. The Latin name for this type of being is succubus. And there are stories and myths about these demonic beings really throughout ancient history all over the world. That there was this kind of spiritual vampire-like demon. There was male and female versions of it throughout the world, actually, and in societies that were not connected to each other, which is very interesting. Whenever you have that, kind of like the flood story is, all over the world and in cultures that never really mingled with each other, and yet here they all have the flood story. It's interesting that a lot of them, it's the same case for this idea of this vampire-like demon would suck blood. And here the Proverbs uses that word, Alukah, and very interesting. Unfortunately, this is the only place in Scripture this word is used, and so we have nothing else to really go off of that's biblical, that's truly reliable. We can go off tradition, we can go off of the stories, but very interesting. Like the idea, the story of the Alukah is really where we get a lot of the modern vampire stories from, because that is ancient, that story of Alukah. So all, like the Twilight series and all that kind of stuff is really coming out of this Jewish mythology stuff. Now, is there really a demon that would, suck the blood? And it's unfortunately a lot of it is also sexual too. So I won't get into all that kind of stuff. But so if you're gonna look this up for more information, just be careful because yeah, you might run into some stuff that is not good at all. But it's demonic, it's evil, right? And so you should expect evil coming from these creatures. So we know that there's demons, there's evil spiritual creatures out there. That if you look at Genesis, the idea that the evil spiritual creatures were, interacting with humans, and so that story just kind of carried down, and they're just evil, and that's what we see here. So is that what it's referring to, or is it referring to a common leech? It is, whether either way. I mean, both of it works. So you can take it either way. It works in the context, and it's not completely. I mean, the idea of a demonic spirit like that is not unbiblical. The Bible doesn't. I would say there's nothing in the Bible to rule that out. That is a possibility. Is it for certain? Of course not. So there are some ideas in there. It's like, well, what is this talking about? It's very weird, very scary. It should be, but the idea is that it mentions the two daughters of this Alukah. It's give and give. That lets us know what Agur is getting at. Why is he using this? Why is he referring to Alukah here? It's because this saying flows right into the next sentence. The leech and her demanding daughters are never satisfied. They constantly demand more. Give, 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 give. They're unsatisfied. And so he's using this as an example of someone who is never satisfied, who's always looking to gain more, never content. And remember, he prayed for contentment. Put me right in the middle, Lord. Don't give me too much, don't give me too little, put me right in the middle. And here he's saying, but then there's this. Then he went through those generations of people, and then he says, then there's the Alukah, which is always saying, give, give, give. And and the daughters of the Alukah are always saying, give, give, give. So, yeah, there's that whole thing there. So we will see from the context here that he is not speaking literally of a leech and its offspring, but figuratively and spiritually. So whether he's referring to the little creature that goes up inside people's noses, or he's talking about some kind of demonic creature. I mean, why he's referring to that is to speak figuratively and spiritually. Agur uses the numerical proverbial expression, which we'll see him use several times again, and I'll talk more about this in a later on in a different week, when we get into more of those. But we already heard Solomon use the same thing. Here Agur says that there are three and then there are four. It's type of an emphatic parallelism. There are three things that are, but yet they're really four. It's like they're all the same. They're all pointing to the same thing, but it's saying there's really three, but there's actually four. There's this really, and that's the idea is to kind of build this this imagery here to provide that emphasis as you grow it bigger and bigger. So there are four things that are never satisfied, and there are four things that are never enough. So let's take a look at those. So the four things here are, what are that never say enough? Well, first is Sheol, the grave, right? The place of the dead. There's always more room in the grave. That's what he's saying. As Proverbs 27:20 says, Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied. Sheol, the place of the dead. Abaddon, the bad place of the dead. Those are never full. They're never satisfied. They're always consuming. This really fits with what Jesus says in the New Testament about hell, right? Where the worm never dies, has unquenchable fire. It's never satisfied. That's the idea. Not that there's worms there that are always living, but it's always consuming. Like the leech is always sucking blood. It will never stop. That's the point. It's Sheol. It's the grave. It's always welcoming in new dead. It will never be satisfied. It will never be full until God dumps the whole thing into the lake of fire. But Sheol and Abaddon, yeah, they're never satisfied. They're always, and that's the thing is, like, Abaddon will be in the lake of fire, which is an eternal lake of fire that has no satisfaction. It will never end, because no satisfaction can be made. Once you offend the holy God, there's no way to make that up. You cannot make amends with the perfect holy God. The only way to do that is to have the perfect holy God make amends for you, which is the salvation that Jesus provided, because he's God, and he can do that. You can't do that. And look, in Isaiah, it has a disturbing personification of Sheol. In Isaiah 5:14, it says, "Therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite, opened its mouth beyond measure, and the nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude will go down, her revelers and he who exults in her." And so there's the curse, the pronunciation of what is going to happen to Jerusalem there in Isaiah, which is exactly what happens. All those people die. You have in Nebuchadnezzar's time, and then you also have really in AD 70, Jerusalem is the Sheol is definitely opened her mouth and swallowed all of them up. Barely anyone made it out of there except for the Christians who fled before, following Jesus' warning in Matthew 24. They got out of town. They're like, "Oh, time to go. We see this abomination happening. Time to roll, people. The end is near." And so they got out and they ran to the hills and they were saved. But those that stayed obviously died, and died horrible, disturbing deaths. So that's the first one, Sheol. Second one, the barren womb. The womb was designed by God to carry children. That's why the womb is there, right? That's why women have wombs. That's why men don't have wombs, because we don't carry children. But the idea is the existence of that organ in the body is to do one thing, which is to carry children. So the womb that is closed does not accomplish its intended purpose. Because it is barren, it's never satisfied, right? It should have children. Now, there's various reasons why that doesn't happen. Maybe because of sin. Maybe God just has chosen to close the womb. It's his prerogative. Remember the story of Rachel and Leah with Jacob. Rachel was unsatisfied because of her lack of children. Genesis 31 says, "When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, 'Give me children, or I shall die.'" And so that kind of expresses her, obviously, the unsatisfied womb there. This also been suggested to be talking about evil sexual desire, which when indulged is never satisfied. So, is that what's talking about here? It could be. Or is it just the fact that the womb is not satisfied? So, some would see that it's tied to like sexual immorality, and never the sexual desire never being satisfied. And that's true too. That's absolutely true. You can definitely see that. But if you take it the more, so it's just the barren womb itself, then yeah, okay, that's never satisfied. The barren womb isn't, because the point of the womb is to have a child in it. So, if it doesn't have one, then it's not satisfied. Makes sense. And I know that's hard for some people because they try to have children, they can't have children. Not saying that's anything. It's always because of evil. Sometimes it is, but not always. But God is in control of that. But then again, the fact is there's no child there. So, all right, number 3, the land without water. This is a picture of a desert land that even after receiving lots of water dries up again. It needs more. You understand that? You see that in the desert. You have those gullies that just fill up with water. As soon as it rains, the water, all these plants sprout up, and then boom, it's gone, and it's back to giant cracks in the ground. And land is always need more water. There's always need for rain. You have plants, it needs rain. So the water, the earth will. Even after floods, you can have a flood in one year, and the next year you have a drought. So it always needs more water. That's a great picture of something that is never satisfied. And then finally, fire. The nature of fire is to keep consuming until it is exhausted either all the combustible materials or it runs out of oxygen. Right? It'll consume everything it needs. And it doesn't do that. It doesn't stop until it has done that. It's never satisfied. If you keep giving it more oxygen and more material to burn, it will keep burning. That's just how it is. So the fires of hell are said to be unquenchable. You can't put them out. They're always consuming. This is the fire that never burns out. Right? The lake of fire is said to be unquenchable. You cannot put this thing out. It always has material to burn. So, now, what is the meaning here? Well, why does Agur tell us these enigmatic proverbs? Why is he telling us these? Well, from the context, we see him talking about sin. Verses 11 through 14 before, and then verse 17 after, are all about sinfulness. So you put this together, and we have Agur teaching on the insatiableness of sin. Indulging sin does not satisfy it. If anything, it makes it worse. This is a warning to us that sin is not satisfied. If you are going to indulge in sin, you will never come to the end of it. You never will. If you give it an inch, it will go. Keep going. If you make provision for sin, it will take it, and it will destroy you. And so that's the warning there, to be careful of sin. If you give it a moment, it will consume you. And so there's the idea of, and Paul talks about having that separation from sin, separating yourself from sinfulness, and being careful about that. It'll consume you. It will not stop. It will not stop. And so that's the warning. So that's the end of our lesson for this week. We got one more section to look at, and then we'll be done for this week. So come back on Bride or Raise, and I don't even want to talk about it. Come back, please, and we'll talk more about this. So I'll see you back here next time.